You're feeling really stressed about something, money, a relationship, maybe a forthcoming exam, and then someone comes up to you and says, just think positive. Brilliant. Why didn't you think of that? In this video, I'm going to unpack why just think positive is usually really unhelpful advice. Then I'll tell you about the kind of advice that might actually be helpful based on research from psychology. Let's start off with an important clarification. Thoughts do influence emotions. If I walk into a presentation thinking I'm going to humiliate myself, it's only natural I'm going to start feeling very nervous about that presentation, and those excessive nerves are likely to negatively affect my performance. This is an example of what psychologists refer to as a self-fulfilling prophecy. So intuitively, it kind of makes sense that people think, well, just swap the negative thought for a positive one. Job done. But evidence-based and effective ways of dealing with negative thinking are much more about challenging the basis of negative thoughts and generating more realistic and rational alternative thoughts. That's very different from trying to force yourself into a more cheerful state. Once you start to look at the research, you can quickly see why forced positivity often backfires. There's a classic set of studies on thought suppression, often referred to as the white bear effect. If I said to you, whatever you do, don't think about a white bear, there's a pretty good chance you'll immediately start to picture a white bear. That's not just you being awkward. Basically, when you try not to think a thought, part of your mind has to keep checking, am I thinking it yet? And that process keeps the thought active. This is called ironic process theory and addresses how attempts to suppress a thought can rebound, especially when you're stressed or mentally loaded. If we translate this into trying to force positivity, a simple statement such as, don't feel anxious, be optimistic, can quickly become, am I still anxious? Why am I not optimistic yet? So the very statement intended to banish the negative thinking can actually keep it circling around. That's why simply trying to push away negative thoughts can actually make them stickier, especially when you're stressed. The next reason that trying to force positivity can backfire comes from the literature on emotional regulation. Some people don't just feel anxious or sad, they judge themselves for it. So the primary emotion is something like, I feel anxious. But the secondary reaction to that emotion is, I shouldn't feel this. A positive person wouldn't feel this. What's wrong with me? So now you're not just anxious, you're anxious and ashamed, and failing at positivity. In clinical settings, this is often referred to as secondary emotions. The key idea being that harshly judging yourself for the presence of a negative thought or emotion just adds another layer of distress. Forced positivity feeds into this loop because it turns being okay into a standard you're supposed to meet, thus fueling the negative secondary emotions when you don't. This matters because things like shame aren't exactly catalysts for positive change. Quite often, they just result in increased distress and avoidance. Another reason that false positivity can backfire is that negative emotions and the associated thinking aren't simply some kind of random glitch. They often signal something meaningful, maybe a threat that you need to prepare for, a loss that you need to process, or a need that isn't being met. In appraisal and functional theories of emotion, emotions are linked to how we evaluate a situation and whether we think we can cope with it. In that sense, emotion is a source of information. Just slapping a think positive label over such information is a bit like putting masking tape over your car's check engine light. You can't see the warning anymore, but that doesn't mean the problem's gone away. If you treat any uncomfortable emotions or thoughts as errors that need to be overwritten, you can miss out on what they're telling you, and this can result in the appropriate action being delayed or simply not happening at all. Here are 3 alternatives to forcing positivity that are generally better supported by the literature from psychology. In emotional regulation research, a consistent finding is that reappraisal, or changing how you interpret a situation, is more effective than simply trying to suppress how you feel. Here's what reappraisal might sound like. I'm anxious about this talk. I'm anxious because this talk matters to me, which is why I've prepared for it extensively. I might really mess this talk up. That might be one possible outcome, but even if it were to occur, I can learn from the experience and then do better next time. Crucially, you're not simply saying everything is or will be just fine. You're saying this is hard, but there's an accurate and rational way to look at it. This keeps you in contact with reality, but tends to stop negative emotions and thoughts from escalating. Another evidence-based direction comes from approaches such as acceptance and commitment therapy, the aim of which is to promote psychological flexibility. The idea is that instead of trying to win against your feelings and thoughts, you practice noticing them and still move towards what matters. The mindset is something like, I notice anxiety's here. I don't like it, but I don't have to fight it. What's one small step that I could take anyway? Notice that this is not, I must feel positive and lose the anxiety. It's, I can do this despite the anxiety. This is important because it avoids progress becoming a hostage to positivity. Another approach that beats simply trying to force positivity is that of behavioural activation, which relates to the fact that mood often follows behaviour. Behavioural activation receives significant support in the treatment of depression, but the underlying principle generalises more broadly. For example, when people feel down, they often withdraw from activities they find pleasurable or that give them a sense of achievement. And this withdrawal then maintains or exacerbates the low mood. Behavioural activation is built on a simple principle. Action increases contact with reinforcement, and over time, this can result in shifts in mood. Behavioural activation flips the usual script of, I need to feel positive before I can act, to, I'll start small and the positive feelings will follow. Positive behaviour often promotes more positive thinking, but trying to force positive thinking often just stalls the initiation of positive behaviour. Behavioural activation can give you a reason to feel positive, rather than setting up positivity as a precursor to getting things done. So where does all of this leave us? Well, the problem isn't with positivity in and of itself, it's the forced, simplified version that's the issue. What tends to work much better is noticing how you think and feel and not judging yourself for it. Making a deliberate effort to reappraise challenging situations using reason and evidence, and not expecting action to follow positivity. Quite often it's the other way around. If you're interested in learning more about psychology and its application to life and learning, hit those like and subscribe buttons, and I'll see you in the next episode.